Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Monday, June the 3rd, 2024. Today, Mercury moves into Gemini, and I want to take this opportunity to consider what it means for Mercury to be in Gemini, what it means for the world, and in particular, what it means if you have Mercury in Gemini in your chart. Now, there's always a problem with looking at Mercury in Gemini in isolation, or indeed Mercury in any sign in isolation, because Mercury, more than the other major planets, it does really pick up on its environment. It's a fairly androgynous planet. It's not a male planet. It's not a female planet. It's not a positive planet. It's not a negative planet. It kind of depends on the situation. And so if you take just Mercury in a sign and you try to say something about it, it may not be tremendously useful. But I'm going to give it a go. One thing about Mercury is that it does hug the Sun from a geocentric perspective. So in most cases, Mercury and the Sun in a chart are in the same sign. But there are situations when Mercury will be in a different sign from the Sun. And perhaps we need to consider how Mercury works when it is in different signs from the Sun. So we could perhaps categorize people into in three ways: those who have Sun in Gemini and Mercury in Gemini, like me, that's what I've got. Then we've got people who've got Mercury in Gemini and Sun in Taurus, and Mercury in Gemini and Sun in Cancer. And I think there are going to be a few differences there that we perhaps need to consider. But before I look at Mercury in Gemini, I want to look at the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is June the 3rd, 2024. So the first thing to note is that Mercury is in Gemini. So Mercury goes into Gemini today at 8:37 a.m. London time. So if you're in the Americas, that means it goes into Gemini pretty early in the morning. If you're in Australia, then it would go into Gemini this evening. So kind of depends where you are, but wherever you are, Mercury is going to be moving into Gemini today. I think it's just possible if you're in Hawaii that Mercury will move into Gemini very late last night. So it's perhaps already would have moved into Gemini on Sunday evening. Someone did suggest that I wasn't talking about Hawaii enough. Well, I do mention Hawaii occasionally, and so yes, I think last night Mercury would have gone into Gemini if you're in Hawaii. So that's quite a big change. Mercury moving into Gemini. Mercury has been in Taurus. And so Mercury in Taurus, it can be about the way people are expressing themselves, communicating. Mercury in Taurus is a bit solid, likes to do things in a particular way, likes to be systematic, doesn't like to miss anything out, so it gets there in the end. I think actually Mercury in Taurus is quite a good placement. It means that you are focused and you don't miss anything out. When Mercury moves into Gemini, it kind of goes all over the place a bit, and it's perhaps more active. It's sparkling, maybe, but remember the Sun is in Gemini, and now the Mercury is moving into Gemini as well. So when you've got the Sun and Mercury in different signs, you could argue that there's a certain amount of objectivity. The way you are thinking is not overwhelmed by yourself and your ego, and that's perhaps a nice thing about the Sun and Mercury being in different signs. But anyway, with Mercury moving into Gemini, it's now joining the Sun, and there is this phrase in traditional astrology which is under Sun's beams, and and a planet is under Sun's beams when it is, I think it's something like 18 degrees away from the Sun. And okay, you could argue that in very late Taurus, Mercury was under Sun's beams, but it's particularly strong when the two planets are in the same sign. When Mercury moves into Gemini, it's under Sun's beams, and it is weakened to an extent. William Lilly, in Christian astrology, he has a point system, and if a planet is combust, it loses loads of points. If it's under Sun's beams, it loses some points, but not as many points. And that's the Mercury and Gemini. Also, as soon as Mercury moves into Gemini, it makes the conjunction with Jupiter. So although the conjunction between Jupiter is not exact today, I think we can start to feel it, and I think many of us might be feeling a bit optimistic. We may be thinking about all the things that we can achieve, and maybe we'll be talking more than usual. Another thing happening is that we've got the Moon in Taurus. Moon goes into Taurus London time 6:55 a.m. So if you're in Europe, Africa, the Americas, you pretty much got Moon in Taurus all day, unless you get up really early. If you're in Australia and New Zealand, the Moon will go into Taurus much later. By the way, I should say that I did look at the comments. Some people, I do understand, are irritated about the fact that I talk about other places, that I say, well, if you're in New Zealand, and if you're in Western Europe, and if you're in America, and if you're in, it's kind of a bit irritating perhaps that I talk about these different places in different time zones. I do think it's important, and from my perspective, because it just reminds me that this reading should not be focused on any one place in the world. When I was doing sun sign forecasts for a cell phone company in the UK, it was easy because all my listeners, and I stopped doing it in 2008. That's when I lost the contract. But it was easy because I knew that everyone was on the UK time zone. But now, they're on all sorts of time zones, and I believe something like half the people who watch this video are not in the Americas. So I think I do have to take into account everything, and I don't feel that I shouldn't show any kind of geographical bias. So that would be one reason why I think it's important that I do consider and show that I am considering all the time zones. So just a point there. But anyway, the Moon is moving through Taurus now. So we have had the Moon in Aries, Moon going into Taurus. It does slow things down a bit, and I think it slows things down in actually quite a fortunate way, because Moon in Taurus it's exalted in Taurus, and so that creates a sense of comfort, and it's, all things being equal, fairly fortunate for the Moon to be in Taurus, and I think that we can get sort of a good understanding of material details. Though I suppose sometimes with Moon in Taurus there can be a certain tendency to be a bit indulgent. So we don't want to be too indulgent. I mean, it's nice to have the good things in life, but we can take things too far. Now, the last time the Moon was in Taurus, we also had Jupiter in Taurus. So we always were running up to the conjunction between the Moon and Jupiter in this sign. Unfortunately, that's no longer the case, because the Moon has now left Taurus and is in Gemini. Now, there are some other aspects going on. Jupiter is now trine Pluto. This trine between Jupiter and Pluto is exact. And this Jupiter trine Pluto is about, I think, self-improvement. I think that's the easiest way to think about Jupiter and Jupiter-Pluto contact. I like to just think self-improvement as a key word. We want things to be better. And with the trine Jupiter, we can make things, Jupiter trine Pluto. With Jupiter trine Pluto, we can indeed make things better. And I don't think we're going to be satisfied with the way things are. And that's good. So we have to perhaps work on ourselves and make sure that we really are making the most of everything that we've been given. And I don't think we're going to be satisfied with second best with Jupiter trine Pluto. So we actually saw Jupiter trine Pluto in action with the Donald Trump verdict. So the person who had all the focus was, or part of the focus was Alvin Bragg, the district attorney of New York. Now, whatever you think about that Trump verdict, it would have been a great day for Alvin Bragg, the New York district attorney, and he has a Jupiter-Pluto trine in his chart, a Jupiter-Pluto trine actually in air signs. And so you can see how he picked up on this Jupiter-Pluto trine in air signs, and as a Jupiter-Pluto trine formed, he got his verdict. So I'm sure that Alvin Bragg is someone who is very much into self-improvement, and he's just living out his Jupiter trine Pluto. For the moment, I suppose he better enjoy his victory while it lasts, I would guess. But that's an example of how Jupiter trine Pluto might be working. Additionally, the moon in Taurus, it makes a single main aspect in Taurus, and that is simply, while it's moving through Taurus, and that is a square to Pluto. And that square to Pluto could be a little bit stubborn and intense. Moon in Taurus, fixed sign. Pluto in Aquarius, another fixed sign. So there could be a certain amount of resistance. People are not going to compromise. People are going to want their way. And that kind of contrasts with the Gemini picture. We're getting more and more planets piling into Gemini. We've now got 4 planets in Gemini. So we've got Mercury, Jupiter, Venus, and Sun in Gemini. So it's really piling up in Gemini. And the moon in Taurus, perhaps square Pluto, gives us a different picture. Yes, it might feel as if there's more flexibility, more scope for agreement. More scope for, I won't say disagreement, more scope for different views and not being tied to one particular view. And that seems to be the way it's going. But on things that are really important, things that are emotionally important, maybe there won't be so much flexibility because the moon is in Taurus and it is square Pluto. One thing about the moon, it is very close to 3 degrees Taurus. So it's at the 3 degrees Taurus is the degree of the moon's exaltation. It's exalted in Taurus, but it's got a special degree where it's kind of super exalted, and that is 3 degrees Taurus. And I think in Indian astrology, although they use different zodiacs, the idea is that the closer you get to the degree of maximum exaltation, the stronger the planet gets. And so that is one way of looking at planetary strength. But yeah, the moon is quite strong because it is in early Taurus, very close to 3 degrees of the sign. So that's the geocentric picture. Now I want to turn to the heliocentric picture, and there is stuff going on heliocentrically that I think we need to be aware of. And so here is what things look like heliocentrically. There is a T-square. here is Earth in Sagittarius, and there is Venus in Gemini. So you've got an Earth-Venus opposition. And this Earth-Venus opposition is square Saturn. And you can see that today there is a close Venus-Saturn square. And that is obviously something you can't really see from a geocentric perspective. Though, it is true that Venus is moving towards a square of Saturn. We don't get it right now, but here heliocentrically we do get it. And so with Venus square Saturn, there may be a sense that many of us may find it difficult to express ourselves. Relationships could be hard work, and there may be a certain lack of emotion. Perhaps people are focusing too much on details, and in certain cases people might disappoint us, maybe because they can't express themselves. Maybe there's just a sense of inhibition. But Venus Saturn can be mean, and we may see examples of people being mean with that T square. But it is something that we are going to see geocentrically, but in a different form, because what's happening is that the Sun is making geocentrically. The Sun is starting to make a conjunction to Venus. It's getting really close, and that conjunction to Venus is going to be very close to the square of Saturn. As you can see, if you look at the chart of the new moon, which takes place on the 6th, in a few days' time, you've got Sun-Venus conjunction, square Saturn. So you could say that what we're looking at here is really what's going on geocentrically, but shown in a different light. And I think it's just quite nice that it's shown as a T square, Venus opposition the Earth, which is we've got Saturn on a T. Additionally, there is a sextile between Mars and Uranus. There you can see Mars at 23 Pisces, Uranus at 23 Taurus. Remember, this is heliocentrically. So you might say, well, it's a sextile. That's a nice aspect. It's a fortunate aspect. But from a heliocentric view, you might just take the approach of saying, well, they're in aspect. Maybe it doesn't matter whether it's a sextile or a square or a semi-sextile. The point is Mars and Uranus are in aspect. And because they're in aspect, that might indicate things happening that were and are unexpected. And they could be dangerous. Mars Uranus is about machinery, it's about bombs, it's about explosions, it's about violence. And so that might say something about the world on June the 3rd, 2024. I think it's less about individuals. I think, as I keep saying with the heliocentric chart, it is more about the collective. So from a heliocentric point of view, it is quite an active day, and I think that T-square is important, and it is going to have an impact on us. So turning back to the geocentric picture, I now want to look at the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Monday, June the 3rd, 2024. Aries. Aries, it is a time when you need to be focused on the basics. I mean, I understand that you have lots of things going on in your life, that you want action, that perhaps you're putting a high premium on action. You may even think, Aries, that it's soon going to be too late. That there's something you have to do, and if you don't do it, I don't know, by the end of a week, you might have missed your chance. Now, you might be right on that score, but we have got a week. I mean, a week left, perhaps, of Mars being in Aries, because I think right at the end of the week, Mars does actually go into Taurus. So you might feel a certain sense of hurry. Let's get this thing done, whatever it is you're trying to achieve. But today, I wouldn't be in too much of a hurry. Perhaps there are things you need to consider. Maybe you need to think about the implications of what you're planning and your actions, and consider how your actions might impact you, perhaps in a material way. I mean, don't ignore that. I mean, the moon is now in Taurus, and so with the moon in Taurus, it's out of Aries. Things are a bit slower, and you perhaps have a chance to consider what you're doing and why you're doing it, and whether it's really worth the effort. And at the same time, Mars is currently conjunct the Jupiter-Saturn midpoint, and this conjunction between Jupiter-Saturn midpoint, one way of looking at it is to see it as being stop, go, stop, go, stop, go. You know, Jupiter is the planet of expansion. Saturn is a planet of restriction. And so there may be times today when things sort of are moving quickly and you think there's action and you're ready to go, then you have to stop. So I suppose it's like driving on a road where, you know, you have miles of free space when you can go almost as fast as you like within the speed limit, I hope, and then you suddenly hit a traffic jam and you have to just stop. And so that is kind of annoying for you, and it's particularly if you're an Aries. I mean, I'm not saying that's what the conditions are on a road are going to be like, but it just might feel that if you take your life as a road, there's going to be times of free space, free road, but there are going to be traffic jams. And so that might be what it feels like today. And I suppose you're going to be picking up on what is going on in the wider environment, in terms of, you know, the economy and society. You are picking up on that, and you're perhaps realizing that there are things out there, out of your control, which you really, well, obviously you can't do much about it, but they're still having an impact on you, and you can't help that, and it's really annoying, it's really frustrating. And I suppose, Aries, you just have to accept that there is an interconnectedness, that everything is interconnected. And I suppose if you can accept that, you know, that we all are on planet Earth. Moon in Taurus should remind us all that we're on planet Earth. We're all subject to the same restraints. And so if you can accept that, I think it might be a bit easier. Turning to relationships, Venus is now really very close to the Sun. Really close. And so Venus might represent another person, someone you're close to. And if they're conjunct to Sun, you may find that there is someone who just cannot fully see the wood for the trees. Someone is really quite confused, is not themselves. And I think that Venus has actually got weaker today. So you may actually see that someone is weak, or at least appears weak. And the reason for that is that Mercury's gone into Gemini. So as Mercury goes into Gemini, that means that Venus loses its mutual reception with Mercury, because Mercury is no longer in Venus's sign. So you have to bear with people and understand their fundamental blindness, and you perhaps need to go with it, and you perhaps need to show some patience. Someone you think is useless, is really unable to make clear decisions, shouldn't be completely written off. You need to listen to them, and you need to go with it, because in the end, those clouds are going to clear. So you may actually be you may be dealing with someone who is confused, but their confusion is fast lifting. And this person over the next couple of days may have a moment of incredible clarity. And that could have a bearing on a relationship, or perhaps a series of relationships. When you, out of that confusion, clarity happens. And when that clarity happens, perhaps you and perhaps another person will start to understand where a particular relationship is going. Taurus. Venus is your ruler, and it's getting really, really close to the sun. And there is a question about how we actually deal with that, how we interpret it. And I think over the last few days, Taurus, you may have been feeling increasingly confused. You may not have been able to understand fully what was going on, and it may have felt that just something was blocking you. Now, what that thing that was blocking you it was or is, it may just simply be the details of everyday living. Just the clutter and details and everything standing in your way. It just seems to be a little bit overwhelming. But don't panic. Venus is getting closer and closer to the sun, and Venus is about to go Cazimi conjunction the sun. So what a Cazimi conjunction to the sun is when the sun and Venus are really close to each other, like within one view, 17 arc minutes. I think William Lilly says 17 arc minutes, writing in the 17th century. Different astrologers have different views, but when Venus gets really close to the sun and the conjunction becomes Cazimi, the confusion starts to suddenly lift. It's perhaps as Carlos Castaneda, he wrote a book called A Separate Reality, didn't he? Everything is very confusing, complete confusion, and then suddenly everything becomes clear, but completely different, totally different, but it's all clear. It's like you've entered into this separate reality and you're able to make the right decisions because you do have that moment of clarity. And that perhaps is what the Cazimi conjunction is like. And so if you are feeling that things are chaotic, that you can't make your mind up, that something is clouding your judgment, don't panic. Stay with it, because I think from today onwards you will have moments of complete clarity, and you need to perhaps take advantage of this clarity, perhaps write things down. These decisions you make at this moment of clarity could be very important. So do take advantage of this Cazimi conjunction. I mean, the Sun and Venus will get even closer by tomorrow, but I think today is the first day when the Sun and Venus are actually 17 arc minutes apart, and I think tomorrow it's going to be they're going to be even closer. And I think you're helped by the fact that the Moon is in Taurus, which is your sign. So the Moon in Taurus does allow you to ground yourself. So this is another reason to be optimistic, to not be too concerned if you feel a bit confused, because things are improving, and you you are grounded, and you should stay grounded. And I think you should do everything you can to be grounded. And I think that you're going to be helped in terms of what you want to achieve by the fact that the moon is making a square to Pluto. So, moon in Taurus, your sign, is making a square to Pluto, and Pluto is in Aquarius, a sign which is very connected with your path forward, your ego development, perhaps your career, your work, your plans. And so with Moon square Pluto, you have a clear sense of what you want to do and what you want to achieve. And you're going to be very determined about it. And I think maybe today and tomorrow, as the Venus goes Kazemi, you're going to have a clear idea about what you want. And I think you're also going to have a clear idea about money, about what needs to be done with money. Now, I have to be careful there because as I said, as I emphasize, this site is for entertainment purposes only. I'm not giving financial advice, so I'm kind of suggesting that if you make financial decisions over the next day or two, they're going to be good decisions, but maybe not. I mean, don't rely on that. I'm not saying that if you make a financial decision over the next couple of days, it's not going to destroy you and bankrupt you. I suppose it could, but I would have said, all things being equal, you are in a position to make a good financial decision. You might not feel like it at the moment, but things should be starting to clear, and that moment of clarity, it may be brief, but it's going to be very real. And it's not just about money, it's perhaps about everything. And in the process, listen to your intuitions and maybe listen to your dreams, because they might be telling you something very important. Gemini. Mercury is moving into your sign. Okay, depends to an extent where your time zone is. If you're in the Americas early in the morning, Mercury moves into Gemini. If you're in Australia or New Zealand, then Mercury will go into Gemini probably this evening. But wherever you are, Mercury is moving into Gemini, and I think by and large that is a good thing, because Mercury rules Gemini. And so when Mercury is in Gemini, we have a clear sense of ourselves, and intellectually we're on good form, and we are curious, and we have lots of ideas. So perhaps today there will be new ideas and a new curiosity, just wanting to find out about things. And we're also going to be helped by the fact that Mercury is starting to move towards a conjunction with Jupiter. So Gemini, there just could be a new sense of optimism. Though don't be complacent and don't be arrogant. Could happen, because yes, it's good that Mercury is moving into Gemini, but it's now in the same sign as the Sun, and our sense of self and our sense of our own brilliance might get in our way. Geminis can be arrogant, intellectually arrogant. I don't know. I have somewhere. I've got all my school reports, and I remember some history teacher, this report saying something like, he knows a lot, but he's not quite as clever as he thinks he is. I think that can be a Gemini sense. Overestimating one's intelligence, or at least overestimating one's knowledge, and so be a bit careful with Mercury in Gemini. You're clever, but you don't want to be too clever by half. That can always be a problem with Gemini being too clever by half. But still, we can't deny the fact that Mercury is in your sign. It's making a conjunction to Jupiter. You have great enthusiasm. Also, Mercury is starting to make a trine to Pluto. And so, remember, there's also Jupiter is trine Pluto today. So maybe Gemini, the best way of dealing with Mercury moving into your sign is to be optimistic, but also to take the view that you could know more, that things could be better, that there's actually knowledge out there that you haven't fully explored, and you need to gain access to it. And you perhaps need to have the humility to be able to learn from someone else or learn from something else, whether it's the internet or a book, or just sitting there and thinking and contemplating and just realizing that you haven't got all the answers. Turning to relationships, Mercury is moving towards a conjunction of Jupiter. Now, this conjunction with Jupiter, it's not exact today, but it should help with relationships. Jupiter's the ruler of Sagittarius, the opposite sign. So in the Gemini chart, Jupiter often has a strong connection with relationships, and with this Mercury conjunct Jupiter, there is an indication that you can get very close to certain people, and certain people want to be close to you. If Jupiter represents the other person, Jupiter is in Gemini. Jupiter, in a sense, is on your territory. And so you are in a position to have an influence on another person, but it works both ways. You should be prepared to be influenced by someone else. And I think that when you see the right person, I think you're going to be very enthusiastic. You'll see that another person can have a really quite a favourable impact on you. And finally, and I suppose I'm reinforcing what I've already said, Mercury is quintile Saturn. So that means that Mercury is 72 degrees from Saturn, 1/5 of the circle. And I think that Mercury-Saturn quintile is about discipline. It's about having an idea and realizing that if you want that idea to actually work and to happen in the real world, it's going to require a lot of work. And also, in terms of the way you communicate this idea, you have to choose your words very, very carefully. Just don't say the first thing that comes to mind. So easy to do. Mercury blasting into Gemini out of Taurus. So much to say, but hold on. Allow Mercury to establish itself in Gemini before you really shoot your mouth off, and try to be disciplined, not just, as I said, not just in the way you think, but in the way you speak. I think by showing some discipline, you would be doing yourself a major favour. Cancer. You benefit, I think, from the moon now being in Taurus. Moon is your ruler. Moon is exalted in Taurus. And also, the moon is in early Taurus. The moon is quite close to 3 degrees Taurus, which is 3 degrees Taurus is the point of maximum exaltation. Now, when the moon moves into Taurus, does to a certain extent depend on time zone. And so if you're in the Far East, Australia, New Zealand, Kamchatka, Vladivostok, the moon might not go into Taurus until late this afternoon or this evening, but still, the moon is your ruler, and it is getting quite close to 3 degrees Taurus. So at late Gemini, it is close to 3 degrees Taurus, even if it's not in Taurus. And I'm sort of borrowing a bit from a Vedic technique where you see exaltation as being quite graphical. You have a point of maximum exaltation, and you get, as the closer you get to that point of maximum exaltation, the stronger a planet becomes. I'm not sure if I can quite make a switch over between a Vedic technique and transferring it to a Western approach, but it kind of makes sense to me that it's a part of a sky where the moon is strong as it moves towards 3 degrees Taurus. It's kind of, you could argue, it's a bit like the opposite of the Via Combusta. So the Via Combusta is this period, is part of the sky between 15 Libra and 15 Scorpio. And I think some people in the comments have asked, is there actually an opposite to the Via Combusta? Maybe there is. I don't think there is formally, but it is a part of the sky where the moon does seem to work quite well. So even if a moon is in late Aries, I think you benefit from its proximity to 3 degrees Taurus. So I think, Cancer, that things are looking good, and you do have a sense of comfort and a feeling that you are in the right place, and that recent complications are starting to ease, because a day or two ago there was a conjunction between the moon and Mars, and so that conjunction between moon and Mars could have been a bit stressful, and you might have been feeling a bit angry, and certainly a lot going on around you to annoy you, but I think that situation is starting to clear up. And with moon moving into Taurus, you have an awareness of your own power. And maybe you're helped by the fact that the moon is making a square to Pluto. So Pluto is in Aquarius, which on the face of it is not a great place for it to be from a Cancerian perspective. But what the Pluto is doing in Aquarius for you is allowing you to really get to the bottom of things, to sort of understand what motivates people. And it's a time when you can verbalize some of your feelings to yourself. You know, Cancerians can have strong feelings, and with Pluto in Aquarius, it's a time, well, lasting, of course, a very long period of time, because Pluto is going to be in Aquarius for years and years. I understand it does briefly go back into Capricorn in the autumn, but you are getting a lot of insights there, which are about the verbalization of your fundamental feelings, and you're able to get really deeply into things. And with the moon making a square to Pluto, you do have access to your emotional insights. Now, some of these emotional insights may not be entirely pleasant. They may seem a bit troublesome and difficult, but really you're picking up on things, the way they are. You can see everything for what it is. You can see people now in clear detail, and because you can see people for what they are, you're in a position to perhaps make decisions. And so, with Moon in Taurus, you might think that, your social life is starting to move, and I think it is. Things are happening. But now you're perhaps looking at people, maybe friends, and you've known them well, but you're seeing them in a different light, and you're starting to understand whether or not they can be trusted, whether perhaps you're wasting time on the wrong people. So that is certainly possible. Though, Cancer, don't be tempted, and I'm sure you won't be tempted, but don't be tempted to say too much about what you are thinking. At the moment, Cancerians are doing a lot of thinking. You are. Your thoughts are kind of going into overdrive a bit, especially with Mercury moving into Gemini. But Mercury in Gemini, it's an active mind, but for a Cancerian, it's a mind that is keeping itself to itself. You need to work things through in your own way. And I think things will become clearer over the next couple of days as Mercury starts to move towards a conjunction to Jupiter. Jupiter arguably does have a linkage with you because Jupiter is exalted in Capricorn. So you are having to do a fair amount of work on your own, mental work, working things through. So don't feel that you have to reveal everything. It wouldn't help. People at best won't be interested. At worst, they might get offended. So yeah, do keep your thoughts to yourself. I think that would be a good idea. Oh, one final point. The Sun and Venus are starting to make a sextile to the North Node. And I think with this Sun-Venus sextile to the North Node, over the next day or two, you may actually have quite an important realization about someone or a particular situation. And this realization, it will just happen. It will just click. And once that realization comes, you will be in a much better position to act. You know, action is important. And I've said this to you on numerous occasions because the North Node is in Aries. North Node is where Cancerians should be moving. And with North Node in Aries, it's not a time to be a complete introvert, to be completely focusing on yourself and your own private interests. You've got a contribution to make. And I suppose part of that contribution is about firstly understanding something and then being able to take action. And I think that process of understanding is going to be accelerated by that Sun-Venus conjunction sextile the node. You just getting a real understanding about a person or a situation and then just knowing how best to deal with it. And so that's something you need to perhaps focus on over the next couple of days. Leo, you have a great sense of your own power. You really do believe, I think, that there are a few limits to what you can achieve. Okay, I think that might be a little more so if you're a male Leo rather than a female Leo, but I don't want to make a big distinction there. Overall, I think you do have a great sense of your own power, and if things are not as they should be, then you're in the mood for making big changes. So even if you feel that you might be in a difficult situation where you can't make changes, where you're blocked, you really don't have to be bound by that view. You can overthrow everything, and you can indeed assert enormous power. Now, you have to ask yourself, is it worth it? You know, what will happen if you exercise maximum power? Yeah, it's true that you can cause a lot of damage. So yeah, do you want to cause that kind of damage? Especially as the Sun is conjunct Venus. So Sun is your ruler, conjunct Venus. Venus can represent other people. It can also represent your goals and your ambitions. But Venus, that Sun-Venus conjunction raises the possibility that your impact could be blinding. You could blind someone, I mean, obviously not literally blind someone, but perhaps through your own light, through the brightness of your personality, you could reduce someone to just silence and they can't express themselves. So wherever you are, do make sure that people are able to communicate. Don't be too obsessed with yourself. I mean, I know you're a Leo and you're a proud Leo, and you like to have a big impact, all things being equal. But with Sun conjunct Venus, you can have too much of a good thing. And if people don't feel that they can express themselves, if they feel that they perhaps can't tell you the truth, then that is not a good situation. So Leo, it's just going to be really important today, not just today, but tomorrow, next few days. Indeed, it's to do with the Sun conjunct Venus, and it's getting closer and closer. And it's just so important that you do give people the opportunity to express themselves, because otherwise, you could come over as being a tyrant, and also you'd be missing an opportunity. Because if you allow people to express themselves, then you're allowing yourself to benefit from their company. And this Sun-Venus conjunction is now becoming so close, it's cazimi. So with the Sun-Venus conjunction, that really does emphasize how much you can benefit from people. And also, Sun-Venus conjunction, cazimi, it does indicate that you are actually pretty charismatic today. I think your people skills are excellent. I don't think that you have to try too hard to get noticed. And you're helped by the fact that the moon is now in Taurus, or moving into Taurus. So with the moon moving into Taurus, you should have no problems getting noticed. And if you're working, it should be a really good day when you're very accomplished and you have a good sense of what needs to be done. Though Moon is square Pluto, and I suppose I need to talk a little bit about Moon square Pluto. So with Moon square Pluto, you may feel that there is a little bit of a power struggle going on, particularly if you're trying to achieve something and you're wondering whether or not other people are getting in your way, or you feel that it's a conflict situation, and you may be tempted to assume it's a power struggle. Don't make that kind of assumption, and don't be too keen to project, because power is very important to you, I think, at the moment, all things being equal. And because power is important to you, you might project that onto other people. You might think, oh, that person there is really obsessed with power. That person wants to be in control. That may or may not be true, but you have to ask, why do you think that? And so maybe you shouldn't overestimate other people's capacity for manipulation. You might think that people are trying to manipulate you, but maybe what's actually happening is that you are seeing yourself as a manipulator being reflected back at you. So be careful about that, and just avoid projection. Take ownership of your own desire to make things happen, and don't necessarily see it as a conflict situation. Virgo. Mercury is now moving into Gemini, and the moon is moving into Taurus, and I think that those two sign changes are actually pretty fortunate for you. I think that those sign changes are going to allow you to be yourself and to make things happen. In fact, Virgo, it does look like a good day. I mean, to start with Mercury moving into Gemini, Mercury is your ruler, it's going into Gemini. Gemini is ruled by Mercury. So to me, that indicates that You are going to be very focused on your ambitions and getting noticed, and you're really going to be able to express yourself. Your message will be very clear, and from a career perspective, if you're working, from a business perspective, I think you can do very well, and I think that, your message will be crystal clear, and you'll be helped also by the fact that the moon is moving into Taurus. So Taurus is an earth sign. So with the moon moving into Taurus, you may feel that things are becoming less complicated. So perhaps recently it may have felt that things were a bit complicated, that you couldn't fully express yourself. Maybe that was something going on over the weekend. But today things are starting to get a lot easier, and you're starting to see possibilities that you didn't see maybe yesterday or over the weekend. Maybe these possibilities didn't exist or didn't seem to exist, but now you really are seeing those possibilities, and so there is a certain sense of perhaps optimism, perhaps even excitement. And so I think, Virgo, it's important that you aren't too critical. Virgos can be critical. They can take a possibility. They can take something that on the surface is very optimistic, and they can start to sort of analyze it and try to pull it to bits, and then that can diminish this powerful, optimistic message. So Virgo, try to be as optimistic as possible. You benefit also from the fact that Mercury in Gemini is starting to make a conjunction to Jupiter, and with this conjunction between Mercury and Jupiter, you're in a position where you can really benefit from other people, and I think that relationships should be able to prosper, and relationships at all levels. That Mercury-Jupiter conjunction is in Gemini. It's in a very high-profile sector of your chart, and that might mean that relationships perhaps of a business nature, which are focused on perhaps a particular goal, could be very useful. And I think that you can perhaps have a better understanding of your vision by getting close to one particular person. So that looks good. But relationships in general, I'm really quite optimistic about that with Mercury conjunct Jupiter. So I can't see anything going too badly wrong there. If I were to try to be a little bit negative, I would point out that Mercury, having gone into Gemini, is now under sunbeams. In other words, it's getting closer to the sun. And so what that means is there may be a certain lack of objectivity. Some Virgos may be so focused on what they want that they miss out on the wider picture. It's not just about you being successful and achieving things. You have to consider why it is you want to achieve these things. What is the point? Achievement for the sake of achievement is simply a waste of time. And if you are too focused on yourself and your own selfish needs, well, that could spoil everything. I mean, I don't want to make a big deal about it. I just think that it's just something you need to be aware of. And I'm hoping also that with the moon being in Taurus, that will give you a sense of spiritual oneness with the world in general. I mean, I know that sounds a bit silly, spiritual oneness. It's overused, spiritual oneness, but it should give you perspective. you and other people, you're all sharing the same earth. And in a certain sense, is it possible for you to succeed and other people not to succeed? You're all part of the creative process, and perhaps that's how you should see it. And so maybe some of your energies should be focused on making the world a better place, or perhaps taking action against some of the destruction that you see all around you. We all see all around us. There's destruction going on all the time. But we are all part of the creative process. We're all living on the same planet. And maybe with Moon moving through Taurus, that's something you should make a special effort to realize, just as an antidote for Mercury being in Gemini conjunct Jupiter, because it could be all too much, and you just could be, yes, sure, you could be successful, but you could be overly focused on yourself to the point of actually being selfish. That just is a possibility, and I do feel I need to make that warning. But that shouldn't take away from the fact that I think that today looks really good. Libra, you in some ways are feeling good. You feel that there are opportunities, and that you don't have to be satisfied with a boring, mundane world. There's action out there, and there are things going on which are exciting. I mean, especially as Mercury is moving into Gemini. Libra is an air sign, and we're seeing more and more action in the air signs, specifically Gemini, but we've also got Pluto in Aquarius. So 5 of the 10 planets, if you take the view there are 10 planets, 5 of the 10 planets are in air signs. And Mercury goes into Gemini. And so with Mercury moving into Gemini, this gives you a chance to get a wider view, to not be quite so focused on yourself and all the things that might be going wrong, because there has, I think, recently for many Librans been a certain amount of negativity, and I think that right now you can see opportunities, whereas in the recent past they were sort of, they might have been just possibilities, but you might have thought it would have been really difficult to achieve them. But now you have grounds for much greater optimism. But one thing, Libra, that you shouldn't forget is that Venus, which is your ruler, is getting really close to the Sun. So right now, if you take noon New York time, the Sun and the Venus are 16 arc minutes away. That means that there is a Cazimi conjunction between the Sun and Venus. And how we could see this is like, for a long time, when I say a long time, maybe a week or two, Venus has been getting closer to the Sun. Venus has been getting closer and closer to the Sun. And this has been actually a little bit of a problem, because as Venus has got closer to the Sun, in many cases you may have started to lose your objectivity. You may have felt that something was just blocking you. You just couldn't see things straight. It could have been other people. Other people's influence could have been less than helpful. And I understand if you're a Libra, other people really do matter. If you're a typical Libra, that is. But the influence of other people may not have always been helpful, and you may have felt that you were being crowded out. You may still feel that you're being crowded out. And perhaps it was a situation where your hopes for the future were being mixed up with their hopes for the future, and you were focusing on someone else's hopes but not actually considering your own hopes. So that might have been one aspect of it. So Venus getting closer and closer to the Sun. Situation perhaps getting more and more difficult in the sense of there being less and less objectivity. But with the Cazimi conjunction, as Venus moves really close to the Sun, things change. Suddenly you and the Sun, Venus and the Sun, start moving onto the same wavelength, onto the same harmonic. And what this means for you, Libra, is that you're moving into a stage lasting just a couple of days, no longer. This is quite a brief period, but it's starting now, where you have clarity. The confusion lifts and you just see everything as it should be. Everything is crystal clear. You can just touch everything. There is no doubt. And I think that this could be actually really important for you on many different levels. It may actually be quite spiritual. Just having an absolute understanding of the way things are and what your place is in the creative process. But it could be more about your life and the kind of decisions you're trying to make, and it's all there for you. And I think I suggested this to Taurus because Taurus is, like your sign, Taurus is ruled by Venus. So Venus has a kind of a similar experience, but is perhaps experiencing it in a slightly different way. But I did sort of recommend to Taurus that maybe Taurus should, I think it was Taurus I recommended this to, but you write everything down. So if you have insights and things really start to become clear for you, write it down. Because what will happen is that Venus will get exactly close, it will get super close to the Sun, Cazimi, but then Venus will move away from the Sun, and there's a possibility that some of this chaos and uncertainty will return. So by writing things down over the next day, or maybe 2 days, or whatever, you've got a record and you've got something to refer to. So do consider that. That might be a good way of dealing with this Cazimi conjunction between the Sun and Venus. And aside from that, at the moment, I think that you are quite emotionally aware. You understand your own and other people's feelings, and I don't think you're afraid of asking questions, perhaps quite deep questions, and addressing deep, complicated issues. Normally, Librans don't like to do that, but I think right now you're quite comfortable with that. And so you can really get to the bottom of things, and I think that is going to help you. So overall, Libra, I think this could be quite a powerful time for you, so I'm hoping that you're able to make the most of it. Scorpio. You're starting to realize, Scorpio, that you can't do everything on your own, that there are certain situations where you're going to need a bit of outside help. I mean, it's not major, but if you think you can do everything on your own, then you're not going to be able to accomplish everything, and there are going to be things missing. Okay, you might feel proud. You did it the best you could on your own. That's great, but if you want to really do a good job, I think you are going to need some outside help, and I think your feelings of independence, which are certainly worthy, are not necessarily useful. You don't want to be too independent, because you can take things too far. And you can just become stubborn for the sake of it and just miss out on opportunities that can only be found through engaging with other people. And it may feel that it's all a bit of a power struggle, and that may be one reason why you don't want to engage with other people, and I understand that. But that feeling that it's all a power struggle might be in your head, might be part of your imagination, and I think that you need to just focus on, who can help you, because there are people that can do you a lot of good if you give them a chance. That doesn't mean to say you have to compromise your own boundaries. You can maintain your boundaries, but you can also understand the positive influence that certain people can actually have on you, and bear that. If you can bear that in mind, then I think you'll be fine. Also, in terms of influence, you have to go beyond individuals and look at the wider world in which you live, because Mars, which is your ruler, is conjunct the Jupiter-Saturn midpoint. So with Mars conjunct the Jupiter-Saturn midpoint, the stops and goes in your life are caused by factors outside your immediate control. So if you try to pretend that society out there doesn't exist, that you're somehow divorced from political and social processes, I think you'd be deluding yourself. I mean, a lot of people, they say, oh, I'm not interested in politics, I'm not interested in economics, all that stuff is above my head, or I don't care about it, it's not about me. I think that argument would be fallacious, because you are impacted by it all. And I think you're impacted by it, but you may be in a little bit of denial about it. It does matter. And so if things don't work to plan today, you should perhaps ask yourself, who do you want to blame? It may not be about blaming individuals. It just may be blaming what's going on in the economy. Social trends are at work. You may see things that other people don't see. People's behavior, how people are spending money, in shops, what people are saying about money. Listen to what they're saying, because that's giving you a clue. It's giving you a hint about the way things are going. And as a Scorpio, you are quite sensitive. Give yourself a chance, and you will be able to really start to pick up on this. And so, really do see yourself as being part of a system. It does matter. Now, one aspect there is today is, well, there are two other aspects I want to talk about. One aspect I want to talk about is a decile between Mars and Jupiter. So Mars is your ruler, obviously. The decile is about the struggle to actualize your thoughts and even your vision. And so with Mars decisile Jupiter, Scorpios, they do have an idea. You have strong ideas, but you have one particular idea. It's something you're almost creating in your head. And actually, this thing you're creating in your head can actually become real if you're prepared to struggle. if you're prepared to put a bit of work into it. So it's about you as the visionary creator, Mars, Decile, Jupiter. To begin with, you might have to create a certain style, and then people respond to this style, and that gives you an opportunity to have an impact, and then you push it further, and in the end you can actually make something happen. But you need to have a confidence in your own vision. Now, another aspect going on is heliocentric, and that is a heliocentric sextile between Mars and Uranus. Now, some Scorpios might not be able to benefit from them, perhaps because they're not sufficiently focused on the collective. They're perhaps too thinking about themselves. But if you can be collectively minded and you can think about yourself as part of a system, not just a physical system, but a spiritual collective system, that Mars sextile Uranus does allow you to really make things happen. And if you're not happy with the way things are, with the way things are going, Mars sextile Uranus allows you to create disruption. Not serious disruption, not kind of negative disruption, but you can just disrupt things, perhaps in a social sense, and force people to think again and realize that maybe they've got things wrong. And so perhaps that Mars sextile Uranus can be harnessed by you. You're the right person to harness that heliocentric Mars sextile Uranus. So if you believe in yourself and you want to interact with the world and you want to change the world, then I think you can. Sagittarius. Jupiter is trine Pluto. That trine is exact today. It has been forming for a bit of time, but now it is exact. So Jupiter is your ruler, and Pluto is the planet of transformation. And so with that Jupiter trine Pluto, you are really able to make things happen. And you should not be satisfied with the way things are. To assume, well, this is the way things are, this is the way they're always going to be, there's nothing much I can do about it, that's it. Do not have that view, have that approach with Jupiter trine Pluto. Sure, a lot of Sagittarians are going to be complacent, they're not going to realize it, but I'm telling you, there is Jupiter trine Pluto. And you are in a position where you can change everything. And, look at your life. Look at what you're doing. Look at your plans. Are you being ambitious enough? Maybe you're not being ambitious enough. Maybe you're being a little bit complacent. Maybe you think there's nothing you can do. I think that would be erroneous. Jupiter trine Pluto gives you a chance to take clear action. And if you keep pushing, if you have an obsessive desire for self-improvement, then I think you'll be well rewarded. So don't be satisfied with the way things are, because really things could be even better. Really, that is true. Okay, you might then be saying, well, how do you actually make that happen? That's all very well me saying this, it's just words. Well, I suppose we have to start with basics. The beginning of self-improvement may, in your case, be about doing something which is in itself quite minor. Making a small change, a small organizational or administrative change, perhaps. Maybe you look at your timetable, or you look at how you run your day, what you're supposed to be doing at particular hours of the day, and just making some small change to your routine as a beginning. That leads to something else, and that leads to something else. So start making changes straight away, I think. They don't in themselves have to be dramatic, but they all start to build up. And at a certain stage, the full power of the Jupiter trine Pluto will start to kick off. Now, you might, though, take the view that you can't do anything because you're waiting for something else to happen. Well, that is not a view you should take, but it's also true that other people can't be entirely avoided because Mercury moves into Gemini today. And so with Mercury moving into Gemini, remember, Gemini is your opposite sign. And so with Mercury moving into Gemini, you are reminded that other people do matter, and that other people are arriving on the scene. I think someone really new might be arriving on the scene who might be relevant to you. I don't like to do this, but if I want to go for physical descriptions, possibly someone who is maybe taller than average, who is quite talkative, quite intelligent, might show up. That might be Mercury moving into Gemini. But I mean, I don't want to get too caught up on physical appearances. But Mercury is moving towards a conjunction of Jupiter, and of course, Jupiter is you. Mercury is also triggering this whole Jupiter-Pluto conjunction, because when Mercury moves into Gemini, it makes a conjunction to Jupiter, but it also makes a trine to Pluto. So with Mercury moving into Gemini, I think that in terms of your attempts to make things better and this desire for self-improvement, I think that you can be helped by the external environment. Now, you might think that the external environment is a problem, that you're waiting for something else to happen, that you're waiting for something to change out there. But you need to be proactive. You need to interact with your external environment, make things happen. If you're not happy with the way things are going, you can be assertive. Jupiter trine Pluto. And again, that all starts with you making some changes, you making those changes without necessarily getting anyone's permission. You make these changes, one thing leads to another, and before you know it, you've got a real transformation on your hands, which you really can benefit from. Okay, I know this might all sound a bit too over-optimistic, but you're a Sagittarius. You are optimistic. Really, it should be the sky's the limit today. And so I just hope that you can really use this Jupiter trine Pluto. I mean, it's relatively slow moving. It's not that you have to take advantage of it today. Tomorrow might be okay. Just over the next few days, just see what you can do, and really don't doubt yourself. Capricorn, you are actually quite creative. You sometimes doubt your creativity. You may not think that you're a creative person, but there's no doubt that you are. And I think at the moment you're in a position where you can actually bring your creativity to bear in a way that is very impressive and really very powerful. You are going to need a certain amount of self-confidence, but that shouldn't be a problem, especially now that the moon is moving into Taurus. Remember, moon is in Taurus. Moon is in an earth sign in Taurus. You're an earth sign, and so you're able to create some kind of transformation here. So just think about what your number one talents are. Okay, you can only have one number one talent, but what your principal talents are. So think about them. and ask yourself, are you actually expressing these talents, or are you just keeping them to yourself? And also consider what's going on at the moment. What is the most appropriate skill to use right now? Because I have a feeling that maybe you're not using this skill as you should be, and that now is the time to bring this skill to bear. And it's important that you're not modest about it. I'm not asking you to be arrogant. I just want you to be realistic. And over modesty is not realistic. So be realistic about what your skills are, and be realistic about what the most important skill is, and be ready to put it into action, because I think you will definitely get the opportunity to do it. And at the same time, you will have the discipline and the organizing power. Yeah, organizing power is quite important, but right now you are a very good organizer. I know that organization has a sort of connotations of being boring, but I don't mean that at all. It's about having something that is really interesting and is vital to you, but also being properly organized. And together, that does create a situation where you can have a powerful impact. Now, as far as relationships are concerned, there is a square aspect between the Moon and Pluto. I don't want to overstate the importance of this square aspect between Moon and Pluto, but this aspect may indicate a certain difference of opinion between you and another person. And I don't think there's going to be much in the way of flexibility. Yeah, there are lots of things going on in the world. A lot of people are flexible, but in terms of one particular relationship, there seems to be a certain lack of flexibility, because Moon square Pluto, they are in fixed signs. And so if you find yourself in a situation where you're dealing with someone who has a fixed view of the world and they don't seem to be shifting, be sensitive to that. And as soon as you start to feel for the first time that someone is not prepared to shift, that they're very set in their ways, then it might be best to just back off and say, well, now is not the right time to try to persuade this person or try to talk to this person too deeply, because in the end it just could get into a deadlock. And one area that might be a certain source of contention could be money. I think that if you do find yourself talking about money to people, it might not work out. You can perhaps talk about other subjects, but money might not work. So ideally, financial discussions should be left for later. Things will get better. There'll be a better opportunity to talk about money. So, sometimes I understand that sometimes you have to talk about money right now, and it won't wait. But if you can wait, then I would suggest that you do wait. Another point about relationships that I do need to make is that Venus is square Saturn from a heliocentric perspective. In fact, it's true geocentrically that Venus is moving to a square of Saturn. Venus is at 13 Gemini, Saturn is at 18, 19 Pisces. Venus is moving to a square of Saturn geocentrically, and that square is going to be exact. It's going to start being exact end of a week, something like that. But right now, heliocentrically, it's there. And so that's perhaps another reason to be cautious in terms of one-to-one relationships. Venus square Saturn, is it really going to work? One-to-one relationships could be a problem. There could be a lot of restriction. It's okay if you're trying to do, if you and another person are trying to really do some hard work together, if you're trying to structure something, if it's all a bit grim and you feel you've got to work together to sort something out, yeah, then that Venus square Saturn might be fine. But if you're trying to have a relationship which is all sort of light and friendly and emotionally flowing, maybe not. I don't think so. Not with the heliocentric Venus square Saturn. But I'm probably not telling you anything you don't know. I think your own feelings will be able to guide you in the right direction. And if something isn't going to work, I think you'll know that it's not going to work. Aquarius, you mustn't underestimate people. That's important, and I think you could underestimate people today. You may think that you've got everything you need, and you can be self-reliant, and that's as far as it goes, and other people are of secondary importance. So that is a possibility, Aquarius. And I think that one reason for this might be that the moon is square Pluto. Moon is in Taurus. In the Aquarian chart, Taurus is really at the bottom of the chart. It's in a very sort of introspective place. It's square Pluto, so you like to do things your way at the moment, and you perhaps feel that other people just don't understand. There's no point in spending too much time talking to them about what you want to do, because you've got your priorities, they've got their priorities, and there's not really much scope for anything happening in the middle. Yet, it shouldn't be like this. If we look at the sun is ruler of Leo, which is your opposite sign. And so the sun in the Aquarian chart has a strong connection with relationships, and the sun is very close to Venus, and the sun is in Gemini, which from an Aquarian view is a great place because it's an air sign. And so there are people out there who could really brighten your life up for you. They could really make things more interesting and more exciting. And with the sun making a cazimi conjunction to Venus, that this cazimi conjunction is now here. Sun and Venus are 17 degrees apart, 17 arc minutes apart. Sorry, I've used this phrase arc minutes. What do I actually mean? Well, there are 360 degrees in a circle, and each degree can be divided up into 60 minutes. So basically 17 arc minutes is a fraction of a degree. So Sun Venus is really close, and that does indicate that over the next couple of days there are a couple of people who are going to be on really good form, and actually they're going to understand you. They're going to really understand you, and they're going to understand your needs and what you want. So really don't feel that you need to do everything on your own. Maybe you can. You probably can. You're an independent-minded Aquarian, but things might be even better if you were to bring certain people into your life. And see how you can benefit from their company, because I think, the right people you really can benefit from. Though that aside, today there is a trine aspect between Jupiter and Pluto. I think for you, that trine aspect between Jupiter and Pluto is incredibly creative. And even if you're on your own, you decide that you don't need other people, I think that it's a time when you really can do something really special. So if you've got a particular ability, then as soon as you start to think about this ability, your first feeling might actually be dissatisfaction. A feeling, maybe you're not good enough or you're out of practice. Your second feeling is going to be, what can I do about it? And your third feeling is, I need to do something about it right now. So escalate. And that's probably a good idea, to escalate and to really think about how you can absolutely maximize your core abilities, because I really think you can. So don't miss out on this opportunity. I think it's looking good, and I'm really optimistic about the next couple of days for you, Aquarius. So make the most of it. Pisces. One aspect happening at the moment is a trine between Jupiter and Pluto. Now, this is relevant to you because Jupiter is the ruler of Pisces and it's trine Pluto. And Jupiter trine Pluto is relatively uncommon. Retrograde movement aside, Jupiter-Pluto trines will happen. They will happen every 4 years. I mean, you're going to get the conjunction. You're going to get a conjunction between, less than that. So they don't happen often. So Jupiter has to make the conjunction to Pluto. Then after 5 years or 5 years, you'll get a trine between them. So then 5 years later, you get another trine or something like that. I can't remember the precise cycle lengths, Jupiter and Pluto, but it's not a particularly common aspect, Jupiter trine Pluto, and so just important to make the most of it. So Pluto is about transformation, it's about change. Trine is, I think, a fortunate aspect. It's easy. Jupiter is about you, and it's about you transforming yourself, but in a relatively straightforward way that doesn't require drama. It just happens naturally. And also, Jupiter-Pluto trines are about self-improvement, as I've said on several occasions already on this video. So it is a time, Pisces, when you do need to make things better and really make the most of your potential. And you don't have to do this in public. In fact, it's best that you don't do this in public. This is actually quite a private process. If you were to sort of announce to all the world that everything has changed and you're now going to transform yourself, well, you'd just be putting yourself under a lot of pressure, and I doubt much would happen. But if you make a private decision that things are not good enough, that you would like things to be better, and you consider what you'd like to be better, then it can happen. So really, Pisces, it's just important not to doubt yourself, and also to be realistic. I mean, if you're trying to create a transformation, there's no point in asking yourself to do something that is impossible, or to ask yourself to benefit from something that is random. You can't, for example, say, well, I'm going to transform myself by winning the lottery. That's not realistic, is it? It has to all be under your control. And so that Pisces is what you really need to be focusing on. And I do think that in the first instance, it is a private process. Now, I'm not saying that relationships should be ignored, need to be ignored. Mercury has moved into Gemini. Today, Mercury moves into Gemini. And Mercury, when it moves into Gemini, it starts making a conjunction to Jupiter. And it's also making a trine to Pluto, by the way. So Mercury's conjunction to Jupiter may indicate that something is actually happening in terms of relationships. And I suppose that Jupiter-Pluto trine is, as it's triggered by Mercury, I suppose for some Pisceans there could be a transformation which is brought on by a relationship or is connected to a relationship. So that is certainly a possibility. But in general, Mercury conjunct Jupiter strikes me as being a relationship that is getting stronger, that you and someone else are actually starting to find common ground. So that's something that you need to build on, you need to work on. Common ground, but on your ground, and I think on your terms. And that's it for my forecast for the 12 signs. I now want to look at today from the perspective of the I Ching. And I ask the question, what is Monday going to be like for those watching the I Ching segment of this video? Now, the first hexagram I got was Grace, hexagram 22. So this hexagram is all about what things look like on the surface. It's about form. It's not about trying to achieve big things. It's more about how we carry ourselves. And so today, I think we do need to consider our form, how we are presenting ourselves. If we're dealing with people, especially in authority, or people who we need to get on our side, how are we going to address them? How are we going to make our presence known? And the first thing that the I Ching says is that it's important to have a certain amount of humility, and because we do have three moving lines here, and the bottom line, it is about humility, and this bottom line is connected with the feet. And so the feet are what we're standing on. It's how we move forward. And if we're trying to impress someone, we should not have any airs and graces. Airs and graces are not going to work. And the symbol the I Ching likes to use, or the image the I Ching uses for this bottom line, is we're going to see someone, maybe we're going to visit the king or whatever, and we're in a carriage. But when it comes to actually going to see the king, we get out of the carriage. We don't want to have any airs and graces. We stand on our own feet. And it's about ourselves and just having humility. We don't want to show ourselves to be someone we're not. And we shouldn't be worrying too much about what we're wearing or feeling we need to make a special effort to be someone we're not. Just basic humility, and being true to ourselves is going to be terribly important. And it's going to be important that we don't fall into the trap of vanity. I think there will be points today where we find it really difficult to maintain that natural grace, the grace that comes from our own humility. But just there may be times when we just feel we are going to have to make an effort to be someone we're not. It's going to be tough, but we've got to kind of somehow resist the temptation for style. We don't want style to trump substance, but style will be trying very hard to trump substance, and we don't want to fall into the trap of vanity. Vanity is not going to help. I mean, I know that grace, it's how we look, but it's got to be natural. And any temptation toward vanity or boasting, we really need to we need to squelch that. We can't boast. We can't be vain. And then the fourth line moves, and it seems with this grace we have a choice. One choice, we feel that we've reached a stage where we can start to show off, where we can start to show the world how wonderful we are. We may feel that we've gone through the motions. We've shown some humility. We haven't been showing off, but now we can really show the world who we are and what we can do, and it will seem that everyone is going to appreciate us and appreciate our genius. That's one possibility. But the other possibility is just keeping it simple, just being really simple, taking the view that extravagant displays are not really necessary. And the I Ching is telling us that we need to focus on simplicity. Keep it simple. Right now, it's not a time for showing off. It's not a time for showing the world how brilliant we are. We just need to keep it simple, remember who we are, and that is the right thing to do. And this hexagram, it does move. It transitions to hexagram 50, which is the cauldron. And the cauldron is a really it's a very powerful hexagram. In the Wilhelm translation of the I Ching, Carl Jung, I think, writes an introduction, and I think Carl Jung talks about the first I Ching that he himself did on himself, and I think the cauldron was the hexagram that he threw. So cauldron, really powerful, and the cauldron is about where we're taking all of this. So we've had with grace, we've talked about the simplicity. We've tried to distill who we are. It's not about show. It's about being humble and being true to ourselves. And with the cauldron, it's about going even further. There is a sense of sacrifice with the cauldron, because the cauldron is it's a ceremonial pot. Everything is put in that pot, and some things have to go. When you heat something up, you've got the symbol with the cauldron. You've got the bottom three lines represents the wind, and the top three lines represents the fire, and so things are being scattered, things are being burnt in that cauldron, and that means that they're being reduced, and they're being reduced in a favourable way. They're being reduced and distilled. I mean, that's the key word, distilled. So what we're doing is we're taking what we can do, our abilities, and we are distilling them. And I suppose this may link actually with the fact that there is a Jupiter trine Pluto today. Jupiter trine Pluto, that trine is very much about self-improvement. How do we self-improve? We self-improve by focusing on who we are. We don't focus on stuff which is trivial, which is irrelevant. It is fundamentally who we are. So it goes back to the cauldron. We distill it, and it's under a flame, and it's distilled, and we're bringing together. Remember, if you're into the tarot, the cauldron is connected with, as far as I'm concerned, is temperance. You know, you have, and you're bringing in all of these. This, if you look at the tarot card for temperance, you know, everything is put into a cauldron, into a pot, and you are focusing on everything you have, and you're creating something out of it, and you're distilling it, and that's what we're doing, and that's where grace is leading us. Grace leads to the cauldron, and I think what we can do today is we can really distill who we are and what we can do, and we're going to be creating something very powerful for ourselves and giving up what is useless and the things that we don't need. And yes, we can really create something very special, and I think that is a really good way to start the week. And having done the I Ching, I want to finish by looking at Mercury in Gemini. And you know, as I said at the beginning of this video, it's very difficult to make a generalization. Well, it's difficult to generalize anything in astrology. You know, we have cookbooks. I don't know if they still call them cookbooks. So, you know, the way one used to study astrology is that you would buy, you know, you'd buy tons of books, books which had descriptions of everything, what it means for Mars to be in Virgo, what it means for Pluto to be in the second house, and all of this kind of stuff. And you would start by looking at everything in isolation, and that in a way is the interpretation. You look at the elements of the chart and you break the chart down into its component parts, and then you put it all together. And that's where the synthesis is. So it's actually really quite difficult to just look at one thing in isolation. Oh, you're a Mercury and Gemini person. Is it really possible to do that? Particularly Mercury. Mercury is almost like a chameleon. It just picks up everything around it. And in itself, maybe it doesn't have a great deal of substance. It's what it reflects. Maybe Mercury is like tofu. You know, tofu in itself is tasteless. But it takes on the flavour of everything it's mixed with. So I'm just warning you that there is a problem about talking about Mercury in isolation, and you do have to make some effort, I think, to consider what's going on around it. Now, one way of dividing Mercury up would be to consider where the Sun is. The Sun and Mercury are always close to each other, very close to each other, and you know, from a heliocentric point of view, remember Mercury takes only 88 days to go around the Sun. So when you see the Sun in the sky, just imagine that Mercury is really close to that Sun. It's just clinging to it. And so Mercury will either be in the same sign as the Sun, it will be in the previous sign of the Sun, or in the sign following. So if you've got Mercury in Gemini, the Sun is either going to be in Gemini, Taurus, or Cancer. You're not going to have geocentrically Mercury, Sun in Gemini and say Mercury in Leo. That is just impossible. So let's start by looking at some people who have Sun in Gemini and Mercury in Gemini. I'm not saying I always know a great deal about them. Here's an example. Do you remember that case about the lawyer? Alex Murdaugh. He was a lawyer in South Carolina. I think it was one of the Carolinas. In South Carolina, he was part of a legal family, and he he's in prison now for murder and other things, and he got himself into a complete mess. I think he was addicted to prescription painkillers. His finances were going down the pan, and in the end, he was convicted, I think, of killing his wife and one of his sons. And his son the son he killed had been previously in a speedboat accident, which I think he was drunk. And so here is an example of someone who has Sun Mercury conjunction, and Sun and Mercury in Gemini, and so even though the Sun and Mercury is Sun and Mercury in Gemini, so someone who's got Mercury in Gemini, in this case, might think that they are very clever. That's one possibility of Mercury in Gemini. And there might not be any sense of objectivity, because if you've got the Sun and Mercury in different signs, there's a certain amount of objectivity there. So with a lack of objectivity, which you can have with perhaps Sun and Mercury in the same sign, yeah, he might think he's clever, and he might think that he can get away with things. So that is a possible way in which Mercury in Gemini can work. So that's one possibility. I'm not saying that this chart illustrates my point particularly well, but you do have to consider the wider chart. So Mercury here is square Uranus. So Mercury square Uranus, you could say Mercury square Uranus is having sudden ideas, sudden impulses, which are on a sort of an intellectual level, and he just thinks he's going to go through with it. And we have a chart here that actually has no water in a chart, so if you account for Neptune in Scorpio. So I suppose someone who kills their wife and their son, there is something a bit sociopathic about it. So that's pure Mercury in Gemini trying to solve a problem, perhaps. We have a problem, this is how I'm going to solve it, and that's it. And so Mercury and Uranus might try to solve it in Mercury square Uranus, Mercury in Gemini square Uranus, that might be how Mercury tries to solve it. But in this case with Alex Murdaugh, I don't have a time of birth, so it is a bit difficult. So let's look at another chart. Okay, I'm quickly going to look at my own chart. So I have Mercury in Gemini. My Mercury, you might look at my chart and you might say, oh, that's great, Mercury in Gemini. Aren't I clever? But my Mercury is not actually great. I'm very focused on myself and my ideas. There is a certain lack of perhaps objectivity there, and you'll notice that my Mercury is retrograde, and my Mercury is moving towards a combustion with the Sun, and so I'm not quite as clever as I think I am. That could be Mercury in Gemini. And I remember when I was at school, I had to do all these tests to look at what I'm good. Well, I was about 15, and I took all these tests about different skills. There was a test of reasoning, there was a test of mechanical understanding, there was a test of spatial ability, and I got these results when I was 15. This would have been, of course, in the 70s, and this was supposed to guide you, and I did really well on spatial understanding. I got an A on spatial understanding, but for reasoning, I got reasoning, absolute disaster, complete disaster. I got an E. I mean, I was completely at the bottom of the cohort with reasoning, and I remember a teacher saying, "Oh, I wanted to do economics A level," and the teacher said, "You shouldn't do economics A level because your reasoning is not particularly good. I wouldn't go for that." And I ignored his advice. I started to do economics A level, and he was right. I had to give it up. So that might be how my Mercury retrograde in Gemini might be working. So just because Mercury's in Gemini doesn't mean necessarily it's particularly good. It can be a problem. Yeah, if it's retrograde, if it's moving towards combustion, it's not necessarily a good Mercury that I have, and especially as it's retrograde. Another person another Gemini, Sun in Gemini, who has Mercury in Gemini is Boris Johnson. So Boris Johnson, he has Mercury at 19 Gemini. His Mercury is not retrograde, unlike mine, and there's his Sun in Gemini. So Boris Johnson, with his Mercury in Gemini, he's clearly got a lot of things to say for himself. I mean, he is very communicative, and I know he gets criticised for him as being a bad prime minister, worst prime minister ever, all this kind of stuff, particularly his enemies. But there was no doubt that he's very, very intelligent. As when he was a child, he was a really excellent Scrabble player. He was a good linguist. He was good at classics, very good with words, and so that would be his Mercury in Gemini. But Mercury in Gemini can sort of move a bit too quickly, and Mercury in Gemini can get a bit impatient with detail, because Mercury in Gemini doesn't not too interested in detail. And Boris Johnson was, famous for, or infamous for, just not getting to grips with the detail required to run a government. And I think that was perhaps part of his problem. Everything was chaotic. There was a broad brushstroke, and he is famous for his generalizations. When he was a journalist, he would be sort of economical with the truth. He would be more into how things sound rather than actually getting the facts right. So that might be how Mercury in Gemini for him is working. And he's got Sun in Gemini, so there may be still a certain lack of objectivity there. I mean, there are other things you could say about his Gemini stuff. He actually has a really close Sun-Venus conjunction. If it's true that the Sun-Venus conjunction, if you've got a close aspect in your chart, you resonate when that aspect becomes exact in the sky. So we've got a Sun-Venus conjunction coming up at the moment, and I'm wondering how that's going to, and it's in Gemini, one wonders how that's going to impact Boris Johnson. But I do think that Boris Johnson is someone who really illustrates well Sun and Mercury in Gemini. Now, another thing about Boris Johnson is that he was, of course, Mayor of London. And London is traditionally a Gemini city. I think William Lilly in Christian Astrology, in one of his, he was associated with this picture, but he was accused of, not accused. William Lilly had to go through some parliamentary commission because he'd supposedly predicted the Great Fire of London, and there was this picture from the 17th century had this little twin symbol, and that's a reminder. Even as early as the 17th century and before, there was this association between London and Gemini, and Boris Johnson was a mayor of London. I think he was elected twice to be mayor of London, and he's a Gemini, and he has Mercury in Gemini. So it's not just that he's Sun in Gemini, he's Mercury in Gemini. So if you've got Sun in Gemini and Mercury in Gemini, then that would be, perhaps perhaps someone who really could be elected to be mayor of London. Now, prior to Boris Johnson being mayor of London, we had Ken Livingstone was mayor of London. So Ken Livingstone is someone you very much associate with London. The asteroid London is exactly on his midheaven. But like Boris Johnson, Ken Livingstone has Sun in Gemini and Mercury in Gemini. And like Boris Johnson, in his peak, he was a great communicator. He always had something to say. Did he get himself in trouble because of what he said? Yeah, he very often did. He didn't necessarily think things through. But it was, to an extent, it was a broad brush stroke. He wanted to make London a better place. Okay, they had different politics. Obviously, Ken Livingstone was very much a left-winger. Boris Johnson was a right-winger, but kind of. But they both had Sun-Mercury conjunction in Gemini, and both were mayor of London. Someone else with Sun-Mercury conjunction in Edward Snowden. So Edward Snowden was this contractor who got very concerned about about civil liberties in the US and how governments and organizations were infringing on people's civil liberties, and so he became a whistleblower, and he in the end had to flee to Russia via Hong Kong and I think China or whatever. But anyway, he's now in Russia, and so Edward Snowden has Mercury and the Sun and Mercury in Gemini. Now, the Sun in Mercury in Gemini might indicate someone who is very intelligent, someone who is perhaps good with computers, and has a good understanding of technology. But you also have to look at the overall chart. You have to see that, yes, he has Mercury in Gemini, but his Mercury in Gemini is opposition Uranus. So, Mercury opposition Uranus can work in different ways. We saw with Alex Murdaugh that led his mind into some pretty dreadful areas, which in the end led him to killing people. In the case of Edward Snowden, Mercury opposition Uranus in Sagittarius. It's like realization here. That Mercury-Uranus opposition is making him realize that something is wrong, and he needs to do something about it. And then he becomes a whistleblower. That might be one way in which it works. And so it's interesting here that he's got his North Node in Gemini. So North Node in Gemini, North Node in Mars conjunct the North Node and the Sun. So the North Node on the Sun and Moon might be saying there is an obligation to communicate. There's no choice. I have to communicate. That might be how you become a whistleblower. I mean, so for him, from his destiny in life, it was the right thing for him to do, to blow the whistle. Because he had Sun and Mars conjunct his North Node. Okay, Mercury was not conjunct his North Node, but he had Mercury in the same sign as the North Node. And so that may be how it was working, and it just does seem to be, for him, it was the right thing to do. And I've just talked about men. What about women? Well, Marilyn Monroe. Marilyn Monroe has Sun conjunct Mercury, and with Sun conjunct Mercury, one does have to ask the question, because it's a female chart, is she projecting that sun? Does the sun represent the kind of man she might be attracted to, or the kind of events from outside she's attracted to? And I'm thinking particularly of, Arthur Miller. I know she was married several times, but Arthur Miller, intellectual, playwright. Books were always important to Marilyn Monroe. She liked had pictures of her reading. And so if she has Sun in Gemini conjunct Mercury, that might indicate that she aspired to something there. And so if she couldn't be a full intellectual herself, she could sort of marry someone like Arthur Miller. Okay, I understand the marriage didn't last so very long, but that may say something about her and her aspirations. Now, that Sun-Mercury conjunction, it's not just a conjunction. Mercury is combust, and I think that is a problem. Mercury is... Okay, it's the way she's communicating. She was communicating. Obviously, she was in some ways a very effective communicator. She was able to communicate. She was able to communicate very well. She could say things that people listened to, obviously through her film and her interviews. So she said lots of different things, and she clearly was able to show a perspective on the world. So no doubt that she was able to get that Mercury across. Oh, by the way, it was her 98th birthday 2 days ago. So a belated happy 98th birthday to Marilyn Monroe. And that Mercury may just have been a bit overwhelmed. Mercury should have been about making decisions and working out what's right and making decisions for herself, but the Sun is overwhelming it. And so perhaps the Sun overwhelming it, maybe some of the men in her life were just preventing her from communicating as well as she should have been able to communicate. I mean, not just about the communication, the way she's talking, but the way she's thinking, because Mercury is about thinking. And Sun and Mercury is both in Gemini, so there's a lack of objectivity. She's not entirely thinking about an alternative view, and so that's why by the time she hits 36, that's it. She's basically run out of steam, and it's just difficult for her to go any further. Now I want to just consider a couple of people who have got Mercury in Gemini, but Sun in Taurus. So one person with Mercury in Gemini and Sun in Taurus is the German terrorist leader, Andreas Baader of the Baader-Meinhof gang. And there is his Sun in Taurus, and there is his Mercury in Gemini. So the Sun in Taurus is very persistent, is very focused. Taurians make good terrorists because Taurians understand this needs to be done. There is no option. If Taurians say they're going to do something, they tend to do it. And Timothy McVeigh had Sun in Taurus, for example. Guy Fawkes, who tried to blow up the Houses of Parliament in 1605, he had Sun in Taurus. So it's quite good if you want to be a terrorist to have Sun in Taurus. You will see things through to the very end. But he does have Mercury in Gemini. So Mercury in Gemini represents the sort of ideas and the communication. He wasn't just a lone wolf. He was able to interact with other people. I think that, in terms of the Baader-Meinhof gang, pretty much all of the Baader-Meinhof gang, they had higher degrees, PhDs and whatever, and but not him. He didn't He didn't graduate from university, but those are the kind of people he associated with, and so he was very much into the ideas of what he was doing. So there was a philosophy there, fighting against injustice, being concerned about, what the Baader-Meinhof gang was very, very concerned about what's happening in Palestine. And so that might be how that variety, that difference works. But fundamentally, he's a Taurus. So that Mercury in Gemini you could argue, is serving the Sun in Taurus. It's acting as a messenger for the Sun in Taurus. But who he fundamentally is the terrorist. The Sun in Taurus, this is what he has, the aim. This is what he wants to do. Tucker Carlson is another Sun in Taurus with, I've got him somewhere. Tucker Carlson has, I haven't got him listed. Okay, Tucker Carlson he has Sun in Taurus and Mercury in Gemini. There he is. So there is Tucker Carlson, his Sun on conjunct Algol, new moon in Taurus. So Sun in Taurus represents, I suppose, who he is. Okay, he's not a terrorist, but to my knowledge, but I suppose some might regard him as being a terrorist in some ways. Depends on your political perspective. He's a disruptor, but Sun in Taurus does suggest that he has an agenda, an ideological agenda, a very fixed agenda, very clear about what he wants. He may not show it all because he's communicating through his Mercury in Gemini. Mercury in Gemini is him talking, talking on Fox, having an interview with Putin. He's able to do it very well. That Mercury in Gemini is alone. It's not combust the Sun. You see, if he had Sun in Gemini, that Sun in Gemini would be potentially damaging that Mercury in Gemini. But that Mercury in Gemini, because there's no other planet in Gemini, that Mercury in Gemini can perhaps operate in sort of a purer way and can be perhaps more effective than if it had Sun in Taurus in its way. So I think that is perhaps a good illustration of why it might be useful to have your Sun and Mercury in a different sign. And so those are a couple of people with Sun in Taurus. But what about the other side? People who have got Sun in Cancer and Mercury in Gemini. So Sun in Cancer would be people who perhaps are more emotional, who are more focused on something that is important to them and their family and their group and their interest group. Someone I've talked about quite recently, is David Frankfurter. So David Frankfurter, he had Sun in Cancer and Mercury in Gemini. So he was a Croatian. He was Jewish, and in the 1930s he assassinated a Nazi in Switzerland, and a Swiss Nazi, Wilhelm Gruslos, and in a way, his assassinating Wilhelm Gruslos probably saved his life, because as a result of him assassinating Wilhelm Gruslos, he was arrested in Switzerland and so spent the Second World War in a Swiss prison, safely in a Swiss prison. So if he hadn't have done that, he would have been somewhere in Europe and perhaps would have been killed in the Holocaust. But his family were killed in the Holocaust. But in his case, maybe we would interpret this as saying the Sun in Cancer is perhaps about him being concerned about his people, about the Jews being persecuted by the Nazis. he's in Switzerland. He sees someone attacking his people, and therefore he responds, and he does it so Mercury thinks about it, and so he's got Mercury conjunct Pluto. So, and this Mercury is hit. It's very interesting. He's got Mercury conjunct Pluto, and it's square Mars. So his Mercury, he's got Mars-Pluto square, and so in this case, Mercury in Gemini is able to work out a plot to assassinate this Swiss Nazi. And perhaps because he has a certain amount of objectivity, that's that Mercury in Gemini carrying out the plot, having to, knock on Wilhelm Grusloff's door. I think Grusloff's wife invites him in and says he wants to talk to Grusloff, and he gets access to Grusloff's house. He gets inside the house, and then he kills him. So that might be how Mercury in Gemini is working. But we have to look. It's no good just looking at Mercury in Gemini. We have to see what colours Mercury in Gemini. And in this case, it's that Pluto square Mars that colours Mercury in Gemini. And another person who seems to be completely subjective, but who has Mercury in Gemini, who says a lot of stuff, is Lindsey Graham, the neocon from South Carolina, who's got a sun in Cancer. So fundamentally, he is a Cancerian, born pretty close to the United States birthday. He has strong beliefs about what America should be doing, about America's mission, how Russia needs to be defeated, how he needs to support Israel. That's him, sun in Cancer, and that's who he is. But how does he actually get his sun in Cancer across? Well, through his Mercury in Gemini. Mercury in Gemini conjunct the South Node. He talks a lot. He talks a lot about killing Russians. Mercury conjunct the South Node. He talks a lot about how that help about in Congress about what America should be doing. So yeah, he doesn't shut up. Mercury keeps talking, but it is conjunct the South Node, and I think he does say some pretty unpleasant things at times. For example, about how good it is to kill Russians and how that that kind of thing. And that may not be very helpful, but we have to remember Mercury in Gemini is just how he is communicating. The fundamental him, the fundamental Lindsey Graham, is that sun in Cancer, and so that might be a way of looking at how Mercury in Gemini works. Not an entirely satisfactory exercise, but nonetheless, I think we have to see Mercury in Gemini as being quite strongly placed, but we do have to consider other things in the chart, in particular where the sun is and whether or not Mercury is combust. So that's all I'm going to say on the subject. Thank you very much for listening. If you enjoyed this video, I would be grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I would be very grateful if you were to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. So thanks again for bearing with me, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.